guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Jessica Ward King, the StigmaCrusher here. So I have a problem with stigma, and it's not necessarily the problem you might think. Like, yes, obviously I have a problem with stigma, but so here is the thing. The way that stigma works is kind of caused by the way that I talk about mental illness. Yes, I said it. The way that I talk about mental illness causes mental health stigma, or at least it seems to. Now, back in the 80s and 90s, it was kind of all the rage to be talking about mental health kind of for the first time as though it was a biological disease, as though it was caused by neurotransmitters and genes, and that it wasn't the sufferer's fault. It wasn't the person's fault. It was the fault of their brain, of their body, and you couldn't blame them for it. You couldn't blame a person for their schizophrenia. You couldn't blame them for their bipolar disorder any more than you could blame them for their depression. And it was thought that this line of thinking, this line of talking, was going to really bust and crush the stigma of mental illness. That people were going to respond, they were going to say, oh, I didn't realize it wasn't their fault, and now that I know, now that I realize, I'm going to think and act differently towards people with mental illness. I'm going to take away that stigma. I'm going to behave towards them as though they are just any other person with any other disease, like it could be heart disease or cancer. And we don't stigmatize heart disease and cancer like that, or at least we don't stigmatize cancer anymore like that. So, why would I stigmatize mental illness like that? That was the thinking, treat it just like any other physical illness. And so that was what the medical establishment really taught and preached, and has preached ever since. And it seems to have really caught on. We've bought into it, and it seems to have made things worse. The stigma against schizophrenia, for example, and schizophrenia is kind of the benchmark disease that they use to study these things. And the stigma against against schizophrenia has gotten worse in the last 30 years. And they are sort of linking that now to this medical model that is being attributed to mental illness. And the reason that they're linking it now is some studies that have shown that if you attribute mental illness to the medical model, to genes and neurotransmitters and things like that, and to brain disease, that people actually respond more poorly to a person than if you attribute it to something else. And if you attribute it to something like having had poor life experiences, having had trauma, there's no effect. People are willing to be to be in relationships with, to work with, to be in close relation to people with mental illness, if the attribution for that mental illness is that they've had trauma or poor life experiences. It seems to be that if people are willing to say, okay, you've had a crappy lot in life, and therefore you've got mental illness, all right, I'm willing to accept that, and I'm willing to be your friend, or I'm willing to be your coworker. But if they say you have a brain disease that's not your fault, granted, and they grant that it's not your fault. That on that scale, they're totally compliant. Not your fault, gotcha. But this brain disease that you can't control, that you can't get any better from. Not so sure about that. It's that prognostic optimism, they call it. You can't get any better from it. If it's something that is immutable, that it's in your genes, you can't get any better from that. If it's in your brain, well, we don't have much hope of getting any better from that, at least in our lifetime. So you can't get any better from that. Ooh, I don't know if I want to know you. I don't know if I want to be associated with you, right? So that's kind of concerning. What's also concerning is this tendency for the medical model to increase the desire for social distance in people. This desire for social distance is a desire that I was talking about, for people to not want to know you, to not want to be near you. And it's the medical model seems to be responsible for people being concerned about potentially you being violent, or you being unstable, or you being, as I said, unable to get better. And this is really concerning, because this is the model that we are teaching our children. This is the model that we've been teaching for the last 30 years, and that we all seem to have bought into. And what concerns me personally as a human being the most is this is the model that is true for me. So for me personally in my life, my mental illness is not caused by trauma or by poor life experiences. There's obviously with any mental illness some kind of trigger, but it seems to be a very biological mental illness in my case. My illness seems to come and go in a very biological way, not triggered by the variaces of life, but just by its own rhythms. It seems to come on even in its infancy, and its very in its primacy, in a very biological way. And so for me, when I say that my mental illness is very biological, and that it seems to be caused by some kind of either brain thing or neurotransmitter thing, we don't know which, but or both probably, but it's caused by some kind of biological mechanism, that's true for me. And so saying that it's that it's caused by trauma would be very I would find that difficult to talk about it in that way, in a way that reduces stigma, which is what I want, of course. I mean, I call myself the StigmaCrusher, and so I want to reduce stigma all the time. And so I want to talk about it in a way that reduces stigma, and yet I want to talk about it in a way that's authentic for me. And so that's why I say I've got a bone to pick with stigma. I find it very challenging, this turn of events. And yet I cannot deny the science, and it makes very good sense to be honest. Just, you know, when I tell people that I have a very biological illness and that my bipolar disorder is very biological and it's caused by genes and neurotransmitters, and some people have asked me, then what hope do you have of getting any better? You know, and it's that prognostic optimism is failing in them. They wonder, can I get any better? And it's only in seeing me get better time and again that they say, oh, okay, I guess she can get better. But until they see that, they probably wonder, ooh, do I want to be associated with this person? It makes complete and utter sense. And I wonder why we didn't see it in the first place. And like all good things, why didn't we see it in the first place? But how do we weave this narrative in a way that is authentic for people with the lived experience of mental illness? And I don't think that we have the answer to that yet, other than to really talk about that word, you know, not talking about trauma, but talking about the lived experiences of people with mental illness, because trauma certainly doesn't figure into my experience. So that's one we'll have to ponder on a little bit, but I wanted to bring you that that kind of tangled web about stigma. And I hope that you are having a great week, and I will see you in my next one. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Stigma Crusher.